What happens when a 130-pound botanist from Texas decides to hunt the galaxy's most feared apex predator with nothing but a stick? And why did an entire alien fleet surrender after watching her do it? Stick around because this story will change everything you think you know about what humans are really capable of. Picture this. You're floating 300 miles above an alien world, monitoring what should be the most boring assignment in the galaxy. Routine planetary scan, standard wildlife documentation. Nothing exciting ever happens on these deep space surveys. That's exactly what Tyrvale thought as he adjusted his biosensors for the 1,000th time that cycle. The young Zephyrian intern had been stuck on observation duty aboard the Eternal Observer for 6 rotations, now watching endless streams of data scroll past his multifaceted eyes. Planetary fauna classifications, atmospheric readings, geological surveys, mind-numbing stuff that made him question why he'd ever wanted to join the Galactic Survey Corps in the first place. But then something appeared on his screen that made every scale on his body stand on end. A lone figure was moving through the dense jungle canopy of Kepler 4442b. Human, female. Approximately 5 feet 6 inches tall, weighing maybe 130 pounds soaking wet. According to the bioscanner, her name was Natalie Cruz, a xenobotanist from the human colony ship that had crash-landed on this world 6 months ago. And she was walking straight toward a Korak. Tyrvale's throat sac inflated with panic. Every crew member within earshot suddenly stopped what they were doing. The bridge fell so silent you could hear the ship's life support systems humming in the background. A Korak, 8 feet of pure killing machine, razor-sharp claws that could slice through reinforced durasteel, teeth like obsidian daggers, a bite force that registered over 4,000 pounds per square inch. These creatures were the undisputed apex predators of 17 different worlds, feared by every sentient species in 3 sectors. And this tiny human woman is walking right into its territory like she was taking a casual stroll through Central Park. "Commander Veltar," Tyrvale's voice cracked as he called out across the bridge. "You need to see this." The massive Krathian commander lumbered over, his forearms folded behind his back. Commander Veltar had seen 3 decades of deep space exploration. He'd witnessed the birth of stars and the death of civilizations. Nothing surprised him anymore. Until now. On the main view screen, they watched as Natalie Cruz stepped into a clearing where the Korak was feeding on the remains of some unfortunate herbivore. The creature's head snapped up instantly, its predatory instincts zeroing in on this new arrival. Standard galactic protocol for encountering a Korak was simple: run. Run faster than you've ever run in your life and pray to whatever deities you believe in that it doesn't catch your scent. But Natalie Cruz wasn't running. She wasn't even backing away. Instead, she did something that defied every law of survival biology that Tyrvale had studied at the academy. She picked up a fallen branch, tested its weight in her hands, and stepped forward. The Korak let out a bone-chilling roar that could be heard even through the ship's audio dampeners. A sound that had sent countless species fleeing in terror across the galaxy. A sound that triggered the deepest, most primal fear responses in every known form of intelligent life. Natalie Cruz looked the beast dead in its 6 eyes and smiled. "Oh, you want to dance?" she said, her voice carrying clearly through the enhanced audio pickups. "All right, big guy, let's dance." Commander Veltar's jaw dropped so far that his mandibles nearly touched the deck plating. Science Officer Crixon started frantically checking his instruments, convinced there had to be some kind of malfunction. Chief Medical Officer Zaralyn was already pulling up human physiological data, trying to understand if their species had some kind of unknown defense mechanism they'd missed in first contact protocols. But Tyrvale kept his eyes glued to the screen, watching in fascination and growing horror as the impossible unfolded before them. The Korak charged. 3 tons of muscle and fury launched itself across the clearing with the speed of a maglev transport. Claws extended jaws, gaping wide enough to swallow a shuttlecraft. And Natalie Cruz didn't run. She dodged. At the last possible second, she threw herself sideways in a move that would have impressed professional combat athletes across the galaxy. The Korak's claws whistled through empty air where her head had been a microsecond before. But here's the thing that made every alien on that bridge question everything they thought they knew about the universe. She didn't just dodge randomly. She dodged with purpose, with strategy, like she'd been planning this exact moment from the second she walked into that clearing. As the massive predator stumbled past her, thrown off balance by its own momentum, Natalie brought that makeshift club down across the back of its skull, with a crack that echoed through the jungle. The Korak spun around, blood trickling from the impact site, its eyes now burning with a fury that could melt starship hulls. And Natalie Cruz just stood there, branch still in hand, breathing hard but steady. No fear in her posture, no panic in her movements, just cold, calculated determination. "What in the seven hells is she?" whispered Science Officer Crixon. Tyrvale found himself leaning forward, his own heart's hammering against his chestodome plates as he watched this impossible standoff unfold. Every instinct screamed that he was about to witness the brutal death of this foolish human who had wandered too far from the safety of her colony. But something in her eyes, something in the way she held herself, told a different story entirely. She wasn't the prey in this scenario. She was something else entirely, something that was about to rewrite everything they thought they knew about the human species. The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud as every pair of eyes on the bridge remained fixed on the main screen. Commander Veltar's massive frame blocked half the view, but nobody dared ask him to move. They were all too transfixed by what they were witnessing. "Pull up her file," the commander ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Everything we have on this Natalie Cruz." Science Officer Crixon's six-fingered hands danced across his console with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, holographic displays materialized around the bridge, painting a picture of the woman who was currently staring down death incarnate on the planet below. Dr. Natalie Cruz, age 32. Crixon read aloud as translator, struggling with the human pronunciations. "Xenobotanist, third-class researcher aboard the colony vessel Newt Horizons, born in a place called Texas." He paused clearly, unfamiliar with Earth geography. No military training listed, no combat experience on record. Previous assignments include studying moss formations on Kepler 186f and cataloging flower specimens on Proxima Centauri b. Tyrvale felt his stomach acid churn. A flower specialist. They were watching a flower specialist face off against the most dangerous predator in known space. "That can't be right," muttered Chief Medical Officer Zaralyn, her tentacles writhing with nervous energy. "Run the bioscan again, check for genetic modifications, cybernetic enhancements, anything that might explain." Her words trailed off as the scanner results appeared on screen. 100% organic human. No modifications, no enhancements, no hidden surprises lurking in her DNA. Just flesh, blood, and bone, facing down 3 tons of evolutionary perfection designed for one purpose: killing. But then something else caught Tyrvale's attention. The drone footage from earlier that day showed Natalie's approach to this clearing, and what he saw made his scales prickle with unease. "Commander, look at this," he said, his voice gaining confidence as his analytical mind kicked into overdrive. The recorded footage from 6 hours ago. The main screen shifted to show Natalie's journey through the jungle. At first glance, it looked like any other research expedition. She was collecting samples, taking readings, documenting plant life with the methodical precision of a trained scientist. But as Tyrvale enhanced the playback and slowed it down, patterns began to emerge that defied explanation. "Watch her movement pattern," he said, highlighting her path with digital overlays. "She's not moving randomly. She's tracking something." The other officers leaned in closer. Sure enough, Natalie's seemingly casual botanical survey was following a very specific route. She was examining broken branches, studying paw prints in the soft earth, testing the wind direction with wetted fingertips. "By the 7 suns," breathed Commander Veltar. "She's hunting the Korak." The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. This wasn't an accidental encounter. This wasn't a case of wrong place, wrong time. Dr. Natalie Cruz, flower specialist from Texas, had deliberately tracked down the most dangerous predator on the planet. And from the look in her eyes as she squared off against the beast, she'd been planning this confrontation for quite some time. "But why?" Tyrvale asked, voicing the question that was burning in everyone's mind. "What could possibly motivate a botanist to—" His question was answered by another piece of footage that Crixon pulled up from the colony's emergency broadcasts. 3 days ago, a Korak had attacked the human settlement's outer perimeter. The damage was devastating, but the real tragedy was personal. 7 colonists had been killed, including Dr. James Martinez, Natalie's research partner, and according to their relationship status files, her fiancé. The bridge fell silent as this new information sank in. They were no longer watching a scientist making a catastrophically poor decision. They were watching someone who had nothing left to lose. She's not studying it, Tervail said quietly, the pieces falling into place in his mind. She's not trying to understand it or document it or classify it. He looked up at the main screen where Natalie and the Korak continued their deadly standoff, both circling each other with the patience of born killers. She's here for revenge. As if summoned by his words, the tension on the planet below finally snapped. The Korak made its move, lunging forward with the claws extended and jaws agape. But this time Natalie was ready for it. She didn't just dodge the attack. She flowed around it like water, moving with a grace and precision that shouldn't have been possible for someone with no combat training. As the beast's momentum carried it past her, she swung her makeshift club in a perfect arc that connected with the creature's left rear leg. The crack of bone was audible even through the ship's audio filters. The Korak stumbled, favoring its injured limb, and for the first time in the encounter, uncertainty flickered in its predatory gaze. Natalie smiled again, but this time there was nothing friendly about it. It was the smile of someone who had just drawn first blood and liked the taste. "Impossible," whispered Science Officer Crickson. Her reaction time, her spatial awareness, the precision of that strike. It's like she can predict the creature's movements before it makes them. Tervail was frantically running calculations on his secondary console, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Human reflexes were good, but not this good. Human pattern recognition was impressive, but not at this level. According to every bit of data in the galactic databases, what they were watching simply could not happen. And yet it was happening right in front of them. "Pull up the physiological monitoring," Commander Veltar ordered. "I want to know what's going on inside her body during this fight." The bioscanner results appeared instantly, and what they showed sent a chill down Tervail's spines. Natalie's heart rate was elevated but steady. Her adrenaline levels were high but controlled. Her brain activity was off the charts, neural pathways is firing at speeds that pushed the very limits of human cognitive capacity. But the most disturbing reading of all was her stress hormone levels. They were dropping. "She's getting calmer," Tervail said, his voice barely audible. "The longer this fight goes on, the more relaxed she becomes." On the screen below, Natalie circled the wounded Korak with the patient confidence of an apex predator. She was no longer reacting to the creature's movements. She was controlling them, using her position and timing to force the beast exactly where she wanted it to go. "This isn't possible," muttered Chief Medical Officer Zaralin. "No species develops combat instincts this advanced without evolutionary pressure. Humans are from a garden world. They shouldn't know how to—" She stopped mid-sentence as another realization hit her. Earth wasn't a garden world. Earth was a death world where humans had clawed their way to the top of the food chain by outfighting, outsmarting, and outlasting every other predator on the planet. And they were watching 3 billion years of evolutionary refinement in action. "By the void," Commander Veltar said softly. "We've been classifying them wrong this entire time." On the surface below, Natalie Cruz stepped back from the injured Korak and did something that made every alien on the bridge question their understanding of the universe. She started to laugh. That laugh sent shivers through every living thing on the Eternal Observer. It wasn't the hysterical cackle of someone losing their mind under pressure. It wasn't the nervous giggle of fear trying to mask itself as bravery. It was the deep, satisfied chuckle of someone who was exactly where they wanted to be, doing exactly what they were born to do. "Audio enhancement, maximum gain." Commander Veltar ordered, his voice tight with disbelief. The bridge speakers crackled to life, bringing them the crystal-clear sound of Natalie's voice as she addressed the wounded Korak, circling her with growing desperation. "You know what, big guy," she said conversationally, like she was chatting with an old friend over coffee. "I've been studying predator-prey relationships for over a decade, published 3 papers on adaptive hunting strategies, won the Morrison Prize for evolutionary behavioral analysis." She sidestepped another lunging attack with casual ease, the Korak's claws whistling harmlessly past her shoulder. "But you know what all those fancy degrees never taught me?" She paused, adjusting her grip on the makeshift spear she'd fashioned from her broken branch. How therapeutic it feels to be on the other side of the equation. The Korak roared again, but this time there was something different in the sound, something that made Tyrvale's translator circuits struggle to find an equivalent. If he didn't know better, he'd say it sounded like confusion, maybe even fear. Computer science officer Crichton called out, his voice shaking. Run behavioral analysis on the Korak. Cross-reference with all known encounter data. The results appeared instantly on his console, and what he saw made his secondary hearts skip a beat. Commander Barham, he said, barely able to force the words out. The creature's behavioral patterns, they're shifting into defensive postures. It's treating her as the aggressor. On the screen below, the evidence was undeniable. The Korak's ears were flattened against its skull, its tail low between its legs. Its movements had changed from the confident stalk of an apex predator to the cautious retreat of something that had suddenly found itself outmatched. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a Korak was afraid. How is that possible? Whispered Chief Medical Officer Zaralin. These creatures have no natural predators. Their fear response should be completely atrophied. But Tyrvale was beginning to understand something that the senior officers couldn't quite grasp yet. He'd spent cycles studying human behavioral patterns as part of his xenopsychology minor. He'd read the files on their home world, their evolutionary history, their rise from primitive hunters to spacefaring civilization. And he was starting to realize that everyone in the galactic community had been making a fundamental error about humanity. They'd been thinking of humans as prey animals who'd gotten lucky, when the truth was so much more terrifying. She's not fighting it, he said softly, his eyes glued to the tactical display. She's hunting it. The distinction seemed subtle to the other officers, but Tyrvale could see the difference playing out in real time. Natalie wasn't responding to the Korak's attacks. She was anticipating them, controlling them, steering the creature exactly where she wanted it to go. Every dodge, every counterattack, every seemingly defensive maneuver was actually part of a larger strategy that was becoming more obvious by the second. She was driving the Korak toward the edge of a steep ravine. By the void, Commander Veltar breathed as he realized what they were witnessing. She's been hurting it this entire time. The Korak blood streaming from multiple wounds now made one final desperate charge. 3 tons of muscle and fury launching itself through the air in a last-ditch attempt to end this impossible fight. Natalie didn't dodge this time. Instead, she did something that made every alien on the bridge question whether they were hallucinating. She charged back, a 130-pound human woman meeting 3 tons of apex predator, head-on in a collision that should have ended with her scattered across the jungle floor in bloody pieces. But at the last possible second, she dropped into a perfect slide, her makeshift spear angled upward like a pike. The Korak's own momentum carried it forward, impaling itself on the crude weapon as its leap carried it over Natalie's prone form. The beast crashed to the ground behind her, the spear driven deep into its chest cavity, piercing vital organs with surgical precision. And Natalie Cruz rolled smoothly to her feet, not even breathing hard, and watched dispassionately as the most feared predator in 3 sectors bled out in front of her. Remarkable, she said, pulling out a small recording device and speaking into it like she was dictating research notes. Subject expired in approximately 47 seconds after penetrating chest wound. Cause of death appears to be massive trauma to cardiovascular system. Note for future reference: approach from below negates natural armor plating advantages. The bridge of the eternal observer fell so silent that Tyrvale could hear his own blood pumping in his ears. Future reference, Science Officer Crichton's voice cracked like an adolescent's. She's planning to do this again. As if she'd heard him across the vast emptiness of space, Natalie looked up directly at the hidden observation drone hovering high above the canopy. I know you're watching, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the enhanced audio pickups. Whoever you are, wherever you're from, I want you to understand something. She knelt beside the fallen Korak, placing one blood-stained hand on its massive flank in what looked almost like a gesture of respect. This wasn't cruelty. This wasn't sport. This was justice. And if anyone else thinks they can come to our world and hurt our people, she looked directly into the camera, her eyes burning with an intensity that seemed to reach across space itself. Well, they're welcome to try. Then she stood up, shouldered her pack, and walked calmly back into the jungle, as if she'd just finished collecting flower samples. Commander Veltar was the first to break the stunned silence. Classification update, he said, his voice heavy with implications that none of them fully understood yet. Humans are to be reclassified from Category 3, developing species, to Category 7, potential threat. Category 7? Tyrvale's voice squeaked with disbelief. Sir, that's the same classification we use for military-grade bioweapons. The commander's four eyes never left the screen, where Natalie had disappeared into the green shadows of the alien forest. Exactly, he said quietly. But Tyrvale found himself thinking about something else entirely. The way she'd knelt beside the fallen creature, the respect in her gesture, the acknowledgement of a worthy adversary. She hadn't just killed the Korak, she'd honored it. And somehow that made her even more terrifying, because it meant she understood exactly what she was capable of, and she'd chosen to be merciful. This time, the silence on the bridge stretched on for what felt like eternity. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They were all processing what they'd just witnessed, trying to reconcile it with everything they thought they knew about the universe and their place in it. Finally, it was Tyrvale who broke the spell. "We need to follow her," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Commander Veltar's massive head swiveled toward him. "Follow her, Intern. Are you suggesting we violate first contact protocols to pursue a clearly dangerous—" "She's not dangerous to us," Tyrvale interrupted, surprising himself with his boldness. "Don't you see, everything she just did, every move she made, it was all calculated, precise. She could have killed that Korak in a dozen different ways, but she chose the method that was quickest, cleanest, most humane." Science Officer Crixon was frantically pulling up data streams on his console. "The Intern has a point, Commander. Analysis of the killing blow shows remarkable restraint. She targeted vital organs for instant termination, minimizing suffering." Minimizing suffering. Chief Medical Officer Zaralin's tentacles writhed with confusion. She just killed the apex predator of an entire planet with a stick. Exactly, Tyrvale said, his analytical mind racing ahead of his caution. She adapted a primitive tool into a precision weapon in real time. She turned the creature's own aggression against it. She demonstrated tactical awareness that rivals our best military strategists. And then, he paused, the full implications hitting him. Then she honored her fallen enemy. On the main screen, their observation drones were tracking Natalie's path through the jungle. But instead of heading back toward the human colony, she was taking a longer route, a more circuitous path that made no sense from a safety perspective. "Where is she going?" Commander Veltar asked. Tyrvale enhanced the drone footage, overlaying topographical data and biological survey information. The answer hit him like a plasma bolt to the chest. "She's visiting the other kill sites," he said softly. "Every location where a Korak has attacked human settlements in the past 6 months. She's paying respects." The bridge crew watched in stunned silence as Natalie made her way to a small clearing where broken human equipment lay scattered among the alien vegetation. The site of the first Korak attack 3 months ago. 2 colonists had died here. Natalie knelt among the debris, carefully collecting personal items that had been left behind. A child's toy, a wedding ring, a datapad with family photos still scrolling across its cracked screen. "Computer," Commander Veltar said quietly. "Cross-reference human cultural practices. Explain her behavior." The ship's AI responded in its usual monotone. "Analysis suggests ritual mourning behavior common to human societies. Subject appears to be conducting memorial activities for deceased community members." But there was more to it than that. As they watched, Natalie began arranging stones in careful patterns around each site, small cairns that would mark these places long after the jungle reclaimed the scattered debris. "She's creating monuments," Tyrvale realized. "Permanent markers so these locations won't be forgotten." At each site, she spent exactly 7 minutes. Not 6, not 8. 7. The significance was lost on the alien observers until Crixon pulled up human numerical symbolism data. 7 is considered a number of spiritual significance in many human cultures, he reported, often associated with completion, perfection, or sacred remembrance. By the time Natalie reached the final site, the location where her fiancé had died, 3 hours had passed. The sun was setting over the alien landscape, casting long shadows through the jungle canopy. And here she did something that fundamentally changed how every being on that ship would view humanity for the rest of their lives. She sat down in the exact spot where James Martinez had fallen, pulled out a small device that none of them recognized, and began to play music. Not just any music, a song that the ship's computers identified as a human composition called The Last Post, a military funeral dirge that had been played at human memorial services for centuries. As the haunting melody drifted through the jungle, Natalie's composure finally cracked. For the first time since they'd been watching her, she wept. "Turn off the visual feeds," Commander Veltar ordered suddenly. "Sir," Tyrvale questioned. "Turn them off," the commander repeated, his voice heavy with something that might have been shame. "Some moments are too private to observe, even for scientific purposes." The main screen went dark, leaving only the audio feed carrying that ancient, mournful tune across the vast emptiness of space. "Commander Malvin," Science Officer Crickson said quietly, "I'm reading massive electromagnetic activity from the human colony. They're broadcasting on all frequencies." "What kind of activity?" "It appears to be celebratory in nature. The colonists have detected the orcs' death. They're treating it as a victory." But on the audio feed, they could still hear Natalie playing that funeral song, alone in the darkness, where her world had ended 3 days ago. "They don't understand," Tyrvale said softly. "The other humans. They think she did this for glory or protection or revenge." "Didn't she?" asked Chief Medical Officer Zaralyn. Tyrvale thought about everything they'd witnessed. The precision of the kill, the respect shown to the fallen predator, the careful memorial rituals at each attack site. "No," he said finally. "She did it for love. Not revenge, love." The distinction might have seemed academic to the others, but Tyrvale understood its importance. Revenge was hot, chaotic, destructive. What they'd witnessed was something else entirely. Something calm, purposeful, and infinitely more terrifying. Love could make someone dangerous in ways that revenge never could. When the music finally stopped, they restored visual contact to find Natalie standing once more. She'd buried something in the soft earth, a small object they couldn't quite make out. Then she looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I know you're still watching," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the enhanced audio. "And I want you to understand something important." She paused, wiping away the last of her tears with the back of her hand. "What happened here today, what I did to that creature, it wasn't about hatred. It wasn't about proving humans are superior or dangerous or anything like that." Her voice was steady now, filled with quiet conviction. "It was about making sure that the people I love can build something beautiful on this world without living in fear." She shouldered her pack and began walking toward the distant lights of the human colony. "We're not monsters," she called out to the hidden observers above. "We're gardeners. We just happen to be very, very good at clearing the weeds." As her figure disappeared into the jungle one final time, Commander Veltar spoke into the sudden silence. "Priority transmission to Galactic Command," he said, his voice heavy with implications. None of them fully understood yet. "Classification update confirmed. Humans are not to be considered a developing species requiring protection." He paused, watching the empty screen where Natalie Cruz had vanished into the night. "They are to be considered potential allies. The kind you very much want on your side when the universe decides to show its teeth." In the distance, the lights of the human colony burned bright against the alien darkness, no longer the desperate flickers of survivors clinging to life on a hostile world. They were the steady glow of people who had just learned they were not and had never been prey. And throughout the galaxy, everything was about to change. 3 weeks later, everything changed again. Tyrvale had been monitoring the human colony's progress as part of his extended assignment aboard the Eternal Observer. What he'd witnessed in those jungle depths had fundamentally altered his understanding of humanity, and he found himself genuinely curious about how these remarkable beings would develop now that they'd proven themselves capable of reshaping the food chain of an entire planet. The results were both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Word of Natalie's victory had spread through the colony like wildfire, but not in the way the alien observers had expected. There were no victory parades, no celebrations of human superiority, no calls for aggressive expansion into previously dangerous territories. Instead, something far more interesting was happening. Computer display colony activity analysis for the past 21 solar cycles, Tyrvale requested from his monitoring station. The holographic displays painted a picture that would have made xenosociologists across the galaxy revise their textbooks. The humans weren't becoming more aggressive or territorial after proving their dominance. They were becoming more organized. Natalie had returned to her botanical research, but now her work had taken on new dimensions. She was mapping safe corridors through predator territories, establishing early warning systems, and most importantly, teaching. She's conducting training sessions. Science Officer Crixon observed reviewing the latest surveillance footage. Combat tactics, wilderness, survival, predator, behavior analysis. She's sharing everything she learned. But that wasn't the most remarkable part. The remarkable part was how quickly the other colonists were adapting these lessons. Within 2 weeks, hunting parties that had once cowered at the first sign of dangerous wildlife were systematically clearing threats from around the colony's perimeter. Not with heavy weapons or advanced technology, but with the same kind of tactical thinking Natalie had demonstrated. Improvised tools, environmental awareness, patience and planning instead of brute force. They're turning into her, Chief Medical Officer Zara Lynn said with something approaching awe. The entire colony is adopting her methodologies. Not just her methodologies, Tyrvale corrected studying the behavioral analysis data. Her mindset. They're thinking like apex predators now. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just one exceptional human. This was an entire species demonstrating an adaptive capacity that bordered on the supernatural. Within a single generation, they were rewriting their position in the galactic ecosystem. But if the rapid evolution of human tactics was impressive, what happened next was absolutely terrifying. The first sign of trouble came from the colony's perimeter sensors at 0347 local time. Multiple contacts approaching through the forest canopy, moving with a stealth and coordination that suggested advanced military training. Tyrvale was jolted awake by emergency alarms throughout the observation ship. All stations priority alert. Commander Veltar's voice echoed through the corridors. Unknown vessels detected in planetary approach vector. Configuration matches Vexcor Syndicate Black Ops profiles. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as every officer rushed to their stations. The Vexcor Syndicate, slavers, flesh traders, and biological weapons dealers who operated in the shadows between legitimate galactic territories. What's their interest in a human colony? Science Officer Crixon asked, but Tyrvale already knew the answer. They heard about Natalie, he said, his stomach sinking as the pieces fell into place. Word of what she did is spreading through the underground markets. They want to study her. On the main screen, enhanced thermal imaging showed 12 figures in advanced stealth suits moving through the jungle with military precision. Their target was obvious, the isolated research station where Natalie conducted her botanical work. We have to warn them, Tyrvale said, moving toward the communications console. Negative, Commander Veltar ordered sharply. First contact protocols prohibit interference with developing species conflicts. But they're not just targeting random colonists, they want Natalie specifically. If they succeed in capturing her, the commander's expression was grim, then we'll observe and document. It's all we're authorized to do. But as they watched the Vexcor operatives approach the human settlement, something unexpected happened. The colony's perimeter lights went out. All of them, simultaneously. Power failure, Crixon wondered aloud. No, Tyrvale said, studying the energy readings. They cut the lights deliberately. The humans detected the approach. What followed was like watching a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. The Vexcor operatives had expected to infiltrate a settlement of frightened scientists huddled behind inadequate defenses. Instead, they found themselves moving through a carefully orchestrated killing field. The first operative disappeared into a concealed pit trap exactly 7 minutes after entering the colony's outer perimeter. The second triggered a deadfall that would have impressed Karak hunters. The third simply vanished into the darkness, his stealth suit's transponder going silent without so much as a distress call. How are they doing this? Chief Medical Officer Zara Lynn whispered. These are professional military operatives with advanced equipment. The answer came from enhanced audio pickups scattered throughout the colony, voices in the darkness, coordinating with a calm efficiency that spoke of extensive planning and practice. Team 3, they're pushing through Sector 7. Redirect to funnel Charlie. Copy that. Natalie, what's your position? Mabel, I've got eyes on their extraction point. Whatever you do, don't let them reach the tree line. Tyrvell felt his blood chill. They weren't just defending themselves. They were hunting the hunters. Enhanced visual maximum gain, Commander Veltar ordered. The main screen shifted to low-light amplification, revealing the truth of what was happening in the colony below. The humans hadn't panicked when the attack began. They'd been waiting for it. Natalie moved through the settlement like a ghost appearing and disappearing in the shadows with an ease that made the professional infiltrators look like amateurs. But she wasn't alone. Every colonist seemed to know exactly where to be and what to do. They've been planning this, Tervale realized. Ever since word of her victory spread, they've been preparing for retaliation. The coordination was flawless. When VexCorp operatives tried to flank around the northern perimeter, they found colonists already in position. When they attempted to breach the southern fence line, they walked into crossfire from improvised but devastatingly effective weapons. And through it all, Natalie moved with deadly purpose toward the one objective that mattered most, the VexCorp extraction shuttle hidden in the forest clearing. She's not trying to escape, Science Officer Crickson observed. She's going after their ship. Of course she is, Tervale said, understanding finally dawning. She's not just defending the colony, she's making sure this never happens again. What followed was exactly what the alien observers should have expected, given everything they'd learned about human adaptive capacity. Natalie didn't try to destroy the shuttle. That would have been too crude, too obvious. Instead, she did something infinitely more clever. She reprogrammed it. Within 12 minutes of reaching the vessel, she had sliced through its security protocols with tools improvised from her botanical equipment and uploaded a virus that would broadcast the exact coordinates and tactical capabilities of every VexCorp operation within 3 sectors. The message she sent out on all frequencies was simple. You wanted to study how humans fight. Here's your lesson. We don't just win battles, we end wars. When the surviving VexCorp operatives realized their extraction had been compromised and their entire network exposed, they did something that had never happened in the Syndicate's history. They surrendered. Not to superior firepower or overwhelming numbers, but to a botanical researcher and a handful of colonists who had learned in the space of 3 weeks to think like apex predators. As the dust settled and the colony's lights came back online, Tervale found himself staring at readings that defied everything he thought he understood about species development. Commander, he said quietly, I don't think we're observing a developing civilization anymore. On the screen below, Natalie was standing in the colony's central square, surrounded by her fellow humans. But she wasn't celebrating. She was already planning, already thinking 3 moves ahead. What do you mean? Commander Veltar asked. Tervale looked up from his console, his eyes wide with a mixture of admiration and genuine fear. I think we're witnessing the birth of something that's going to change the balance of power in this entire sector. And as if she'd heard him across the vast emptiness of space, Natalie looked up at the night sky and smiled. The aftermath of the VexCorp incident sent shockwaves through the galactic underground faster than a hyperspace transmission. Within 48 hours, every criminal organization, slaver ring, and black market operation within 12 sectors knew one thing: humanity was no longer easy prey. But Natalie Cruz wasn't satisfied with just sending a message. She was about to rewrite the rules entirely. Commander, Tervale called out from his monitoring station, his voice tight with excitement and concern. You need to see this. The main screen flickered to life, showing the human colony's communication center buzzing with activity. But this wasn't the frantic chaos of crisis response. This was the methodical coordination of a military operation. She's coordinating with other human settlements. Science Officer Crickson reported data streams flowing across his console. Not just on this planet, she's established contact with human colonies across 7 different star systems. Well, Commander Veltar's 4 eyes narrowed as he processed the implications. That's impossible. Humans don't have the communication technology for interstellar coordination. They do now, Tervale said, pulling up technical specifications that made his scales prickle with unease. They've reverse-engineered the VexCorp communication equipment. But they're not just using it, they're improving it. On the screen below, Natalie stood before a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional map of local space. Red dots marked known VexCorp operations. Blue dots indicated human settlements. Green lines showed communication networks that shouldn't have existed. Integration complete, she announced to the assembled colonists. We now have real-time communication with every human settlement within range. Project Lighthouse is officially operational. Project Lighthouse. Even the name sent chills down Tyrvale's spine. What exactly are they planning? Chief Medical Officer Zara Lynn asked. The answer came in the form of a transmission that went out simultaneously to every major government, criminal organization, and military force within range. A message that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in local space. To whom it may concern. Natalie's voice carried across the void with crystal clarity. My name is Dr. Natalie Cruz, speaking on behalf of the Human Colonial Defense Network. 3 weeks ago, your intelligence services may have received reports about an incident involving a Korak predator on Kepler 442b. She paused, her image appearing on every screen as the message propagated through galactic communication networks. Those reports were accurate. I killed that creature with improvised weapons and tactical thinking. What those reports failed to mention is that this was not an isolated incident. It was a training exercise. The bridge of the eternal observer fell silent as the implications sank in. In the past month, human settlements across 7 star systems have successfully eliminated over 300 apex predators, defeated 2 major slaver operations, and established a defensive network that spans nearly 40 light years. Natalie's smile was warm, friendly, and absolutely terrifying. We're not looking for trouble. We're not interested in conquest or expansion at anyone else's expense. We just want to build our homes and raise our families in peace. Another pause. This one longer, more deliberate. But if anyone thinks that makes us easy targets, we invite them to test that theory. Fair warning, the last group that tried is currently providing very detailed intelligence about galactic criminal networks to anyone interested in cleaning up their local neighborhoods. The transmission ended, leaving nothing but static and the sound of very worried alien breathing. Computer, Commander Veltar said quietly. Estimated timeline for this human defense network development. Based on available data, coordination began approximately 72 hours after the initial Korak incident. Network establishment required extensive planning, resource allocation, and technological integration. Estimated development time, 3 weeks, 4 days. 3 weeks. In less than a month, humanity had gone from struggling colonists to a coordinated interstellar defense force. That's impossible, Science Officer Crickson whispered. No species develops that quickly. But Tyrvale was looking at something else entirely. Deep space sensor readings showing movement on the edge of the system. Multiple contacts approaching at high velocity. Commander, he said, his voice cracking with tension. We have incoming vessels. Configuration matches hegemony battlecruiser specifications. The hegemony. The most powerful military force in local space, known for their policy of preemptive strikes against emerging threats. They're responding to the human transmission, Commander Veltar realized. They view the defense network as a challenge to regional stability. On the planet below, the colony's sensors had already detected the approaching fleet. But instead of panic, there was only calm preparation. Attention, hegemony vessels. Natalie's voice cut through the communication channels. This is Dr. Natalie Cruz. You are approaching sovereign human territory. Please state your intentions. The response came from Fleet Admiral Korthovex, whose reputation for decisive action was legendary throughout the sector. Human settlement, you will stand down your defensive measures and submit to inspection. Your recent activities constitute a potential threat to regional security. What happened next became the stuff of legend. Natalie laughed, not the nervous giggle of someone trying to defuse tension, but the same deep, satisfied chuckle she'd made when facing down the Korak. Admiral, she said conversationally, I appreciate your concern for regional security, but I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. You see, we're not a threat to regional security. The largest hegemony battlecruiser, a kilometer-long monument to military engineering, dropped out of hyperspace directly above the colony. We are regional security. What followed was the most elegant display of psychological warfare Tyrvale had ever witnessed. Instead of mobilizing weapons or raising shields, the human colony did something that made every military strategist in the sector reconsider their career choices. They invited the hegemony fleet down for dinner. Admiral Korthovex remains. Natalie continued, her tone warm and inviting. You've come a long way to check on our little settlement. The least we can do is offer you some hospitality. How about you and your senior staff join us for a meal? We'll discuss your concerns like civilized beings." The long silence that followed was telling. Fleet Admiral Korthovex had conquered 17 worlds and never once been invited to dinner by his targets. "This is irregular," came the eventual response. "So was a botanical researcher killing an apex predator with a stick," Natalie replied cheerfully. "But here we are. Landing coordinates are being transmitted now. Fair warning, we're having local game tonight. I hope you're not vegetarian." 2 hours later, the most feared military commander in 3 sectors was sitting in a prefabricated dining hall, eating Korak steaks and listening to colonists discuss crop rotation schedules. "The secret," Natalie explained to the bewildered admiral as she served him another helping, "is understanding that strength isn't about the size of your weapons or the number of ships in your fleet." She gestured around the dining hall where hegemony Marines were sharing war stories with farmers who'd learned to hunt apex predators for sport. "It's about knowing who you are and what you're fighting for. These people aren't soldiers, Admiral. They're gardeners. But they're gardeners who happen to be very, very good at removing weeds." Admiral Korthvex, a veteran of 100 campaigns, found himself asking a question he'd never needed to ask before. "What do you want?" "Exactly what I said in our transmission. To build our homes and raise our families in peace. To contribute something positive to this galaxy instead of just taking from it." She stood up, moving to a large window that looked out over the colony's agricultural districts. "But mostly we want to make sure that when our children look up at the stars, they see possibilities instead of threats." The Admiral followed her gaze, seeing a settlement that had transformed itself from desperate survivors into something unprecedented, a military force that didn't want to fight. "And if someone threatens that peace—" Natalie's reflection in the window smiled, and for just a moment, Admiral Korthvex caught a glimpse of the woman who had stared down death incarnate in Lafad. "Then they'll learn what 3 billion years of evolution on a death world actually produces, Admiral. Not warriors, not conquerors." She turned to face him directly. "Problem solvers." 6 months later, Tyrvale found himself preparing the most important report of his career. The Human Colonial Defense Network had grown to encompass 47 star systems. Criminal activity in the region had dropped by 93%. 3 major territorial disputes had been resolved through human mediation. And Fleet Admiral Korthvex had requested a permanent liaison position with the human colonies. "Final assessment," Commander Veltar asked as Tyrvale prepared his transmission to Galactic Command. The young intern looked out at the stars, thinking about everything he'd witnessed. A woman who had turned mourning into strength. A species that had weaponized compassion. A civilization that had discovered the most powerful force in the universe wasn't hatred or fear or greed. It was the simple desire to protect the things you love. "Recommendation," he said into his recording device. "Establish formal diplomatic relations immediately. Classification essential ally. Priority level absolute." He paused, remembering Natalie's words about children looking up at the stars. "They're not just the future of this sector, Command. They're the future we've all been hoping for." And as his report traveled toward the galactic capital, carrying news that would reshape interstellar politics for generations to come, a simple message appeared on communication networks across known space. The Human Colonial Defense Network is now accepting applications for mutual defense treaties. No military requirements, no territorial concessions. Just a simple agreement: we'll help protect what you love, and you'll help us protect what we love. Because in the end, that's what civilized beings do for each other. The message was signed simply, Dr. Natalie Cruz, Director of Agricultural Defense. And throughout the galaxy, beings who had never heard of Texas or Earth, or the small blue world where humans learned to be gardeners, began to understand that the universe had just become a much safer place for those who deserve safety. Thanks for watching this incredible journey of human resilience and the moment that changed everything. What did you think of Natalie's transformation from botanist to defender? Have you ever had a moment where you surprised yourself with what you were capable of? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of humanity, showing the galaxy what we're really made of, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We've got more amazing tales of human ingenuity and determination coming your way. Until next time, remember, we're not just survivors. were gardeners who happened to be very good at clearing the weeds.